let's look at how to divide numbers where there's 0 in the answer, or where there's a 0 in the quotient, which is the answer. Because sometimes when there's a 0 in the answer, the problem can just be a little bit trickier. So let's try this problem here. This says 184 divided by 6. And I'm going to follow the steps on the right: divide, multiply, subtract, check, bring down. That just helps me keep track of what I'm doing. So my first step here is to divide. So does 6 divide into 1? No. Does 6 divide into 18? Yeah, 3 times. So I'm going to put a 3 right here over the 8. Now that 3 has to go over the 8 since I put it into 18. Now I multiply. 3 times 6 is 18. And now I need to subtract. 18 minus 18 is 0. Now I check, is 0 smaller than 6? Yep. And now I need to bring down. So I'm going to bring down that 4 and check that off. And after you bring down, you always divide. Every time. So if you just brought down, you're going to divide. Now I'm going to go back up to the top and do the divide step. So I need to divide 6 into 4. I'm putting 6 into 4. 6 fits into 4, or divides into 4, 0 times. See how it's a little tricky there? Now I multiply. 0 times 6 is 0. Now I need to subtract. 4 minus 0 is 4. Now I check, is 4 smaller than 6? Yep. And now there's nothing to bring down, so the 4 becomes the remainder. Here's my answer. 30, remainder 4. Now I'll try another one. 4,650 divided by 5. So I'm going to do the first step, the divide step. Now 5 doesn't divide into 4, but 5 divides into 46. So I'm going to divide. 5 divides into 46 9 times. Now I'm going to multiply. 9 times 5 is 45. Now I'm going to subtract. 46 minus 45 is 1. And I check, is 1 smaller than 5? Yes, it is. And now I bring down, because you need to bring down all of the numbers. So I'm going to need to bring down the 5 and eventually bring down that 0. So I bring down that 5. And after you bring down, you always divide. So 5 divides into 15 3 times. Now I need to multiply. 3 times 5 is 15. And then I need to subtract. 15 minus 15 is 0. Now I check, is 0 smaller than 5? Yes. And I'm still not done because I haven't brought down all the numbers yet. So I need to bring down this 0. There we go. And after you bring down, you always divide. It might feel like we're done because there's none left. But I just brought down here. And after you bring down, you need to go back to the divide step. So now, does 5 divide into 0? 5 divides into 0 0 times. And then I multiply. 0 times 5 is 0. And then I subtract. 0 minus 0 is 0. And then I check, is 0 smaller than 5? And there's nothing left to bring down, so my answer is 930. There should always be a digit on top of the zeros place, on top of the tens place, like that. And we have one on top of the hundreds. And since 5 didn't divide into the 4, there's nothing on top there. Let's try another one. 834 divided by 8. So I'm going to divide first. 8 actually divides into 8 once. Now I'm going to multiply. 1 times 8 is 8. And now I subtract. 8 minus 8 is 0. Now I check, is 0 smaller than 8? Yes. And now my next step is to bring down. And after you bring down, you always divide. And you can't bring down 2 numbers. You can only bring down 1. I just brought down the 3. My next step is to divide. How many times does 8 divide into 3? 0. 0 times. So put the 0 here. Now I need to multiply. 0 times 8 is 0. Then I subtract. 3 minus 0 is 3. And then I check, is 3 smaller than 8? Yep. And now I need to bring down. So I'm going to bring down the 4. And after you bring down, you always divide. So now I divide 8 into 34 4 times. Now I multiply. 8 times 4 is 32. And now I subtract. 34 minus 32 is 2. And I check, is 2 smaller than 8? Yes. And there's nothing left to bring down, so my 2 becomes the remainder. 104, remainder 2. Now I divide. Here, I'm going to do the divide, multiply, subtract, check, bring down step, so I'm at the divide. So many times does 3 divide into 4? Once. Now I multiply. 1 times 3 is 3. Now I subtract. 4 minus 3 is 1. And I check, is 1 smaller than 3? Yes, it is. And I got to bring down. I'm going to end up bringing down all of these numbers. After you bring down, you divide. So 3 divides into 12 4 times. Then I multiply. 4 times 3 is 12. Then I subtract. 12 minus 12 is 0. And I check, is 0 smaller than 3? Yes. Now I need to bring down. I'm going to need to bring down all of these numbers here. So I bring down the 0. And then I divide. 3 divides into 0 0 times. And I multiply. 0 times 3 is 0. Now I subtract. 0 minus 0 is 0. And I check, is 0 smaller than 3? Yes. And now I need to bring down, because I got to bring down all of these numbers. Does 3 divide into 0? Yep, 0 times. And I multiply. 3 times 0 is 0. And now I subtract. 0 minus 0 is 0. I check, is 0 smaller than 3? Yep. And there's nothing left to bring down, so here's my answer. 1,400 there. See, I've got a digit on top of the 1s, on top of the 10s, and so on. Here's another one. 1,683 divided by 7. First I need to divide. 7 divides into 16 2 times. Then I multiply. 2 times 7 is 14. Then I subtract. 16 minus 14 is 2. And I check, is 2 smaller than 7? Yes. And I bring down the 8. Now I divide. 7 divides into 28 4 times. And then I multiply. 4 times 7 is 28. And then I subtract. And now I check, is 0 smaller than 7? Yes. And I bring down. And after you bring down, you always divide. So 7 divides into 3 0 times. Then I multiply. 0 times 7 is 0. Then I subtract. 3 minus 0 is 3. And I check, is 3 smaller than 7? Yeah. And there's nothing left to bring down. So my 3 becomes the remainder. 240, remainder 3, like that. And here's our last one. 123 divided by 4. I'm going to divide. 4 divides into 12 3 times. Now I multiply. 3 times 4 is 12. And I subtract. 12 minus 12 is 0. And 0 is smaller than 4. And now I bring down. And after you bring down, always divide, because I still don't have a digit up here. So 4 divides into 3 0 times. Now I multiply. 0 times 4 is 0. And I subtract. 3 minus 0 is 3. And then I check. 3 is smaller than 4. Nothing left to bring down. So my 3 becomes the remainder. And there's my answer. 30, remainder 3.